Welcome to the Military Justice Today podcast with your host, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams, covering the full range of military law topics from all branches of the armed forces. Today's episode is made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. And now, let's welcome the hosts of the show, Rob and Mickey.
All right, everybody, here we go. Another episode of Military Justice. Today, I'm Matt Starosiak, stepping in momentarily for the other guys in the room here. I've got Robert Capovilla with me and Robby Morris from the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. And we had a spirited debate here a moment ago as to whether or not we were going to do kind of a pre-show topic, an off-topic issue. We couldn't decide on it. We wanted to keep this episode short. So we weren't sure whether we were going to do anything or not, but I'm going to bring up an issue which I know is near and dear to Robert's heart, and that is the big Michigan-Ohio State football game that's coming up this weekend. And I'll just tell our listeners, buckle up, because this could go 40 minutes by itself, but I'm just going to ask you one question, Robert, and I'm going to ask you to keep it short. Is it okay to steal another team's signs if they're given out in the open in front of 100,000 people?
Not if you have a team of people that are going out to other games and recording those signs on video camera in direct opposition to Big Ten policy, no.
So what if you had somebody who was like a savant? You've seen these guys where they can show them a picture like for 30 seconds and they can draw it perfectly. Let's say that you had somebody like that working for your team. They didn't use any video equipment, they were just staring at the sidelines, and then after the game, they went and wrote down all the signs and it was perfectly done. Would that be okay or no?
No, because the rules say it's not okay, because that's in-person scouting when your team's not playing, and that's not allowed. And the only folks that were doing it was the University of Michigan.
They're the only ones in college football.
They're the only ones in college football that had an organized team go out and record signs from other people's games.
How do you know they're the only ones? You know there's not one other team in college football that was doing that.
The entire Big Ten, every single coach demanded a meeting with the Big Ten commissioner and said nobody else does this but Michigan, and it's an unfair advantage. If everybody else was doing it, I don't think they would be accusing Michigan because they'd be afraid that they'd be investigated themselves. The fact is that Matt is from the state of Michigan. I am from the state of Ohio. I watched Ohio State beat Michigan 18 out of 19 years fairly. And then all of a sudden, I watched Michigan-Ohio State, and it was like Michigan knew every play that was coming. And then I saw a video. I saw a video of the Ohio State-Michigan game last year where C.J. Stroud goes to the sideline, and there's a change in sign, and the entire Michigan sideline starts pointing up in the air because they know, based on the fact they stole the sign, Robby, that it was a pass. That's like the very definition of cheating. That's called cheating. That's like in Monopoly, you're just going to skim $500 off the top. It's cheating.
I don't agree. I think it's fair play.
So how many teams do you think are trying right now to use like AI or something to analyze signs? And is that
It'd be so easy.
No,
it'd be so easy.
The only rule that Michigan could not follow, that everybody else follows, is you cannot scout other teams in person before games. You can't do it. And they had not just one, a team of people that were illegally obtaining signs.
So just because Michigan's the only team that's gotten caught doing that, that means that there's not one other team that's been doing it.
Well, I'm a man of facts. Show me facts to back up your suggestion. Show me one fact that you have to suggest somebody else was doing it.
Could you imagine if you were on a witness stand and Rob was cross-examining you and you said, nope, I'm sure of it, nobody's doing it? He would be like...
If you notice, ladies and gentlemen,
you mean to tell me that
Matt cannot produce a single fact to suggest anybody else was doing it.
Free Harbaugh.
Look,
see, I'm going to get Rob here. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about this.
Listen, it's stupid that they did this, but they did it for a distinct reason, because it gave them an advantage.
All right, so I want you on the record, though. Who's winning this week's game? And sometimes these episodes come out after, so we'll know who won by the time this episode
Ohio State's going to win this week's game. Ohio State is the better team right now.
And what if they don't? What if without a head coach, without a linebacker coach?
Do you really think that makes they're allowed to coach during the week? What difference do you think it makes? Harbaugh doesn't call plays during the game. The guy they have calling plays is still there. He's allowed to coach during the week.
He's such a great man. You remove a great man from the sidelines.
A great man. He's 2-7 against Ohio State. He cheats. He's been suspended twice in 1 year. He's under investigation for not only cheating by stealing signs, but also recruiting violations. The guy's done.
I love getting Rob to talk about college football.
This
scandal has been so beautiful. I mean,
it's interesting to me that Michigan people are like, this isn't cheating. This is the Big Ten is mean to me, Robby. They're mean to us. And yet, when Ohio State's players gave trophies for tattoos, Michigan acted like it was Watergate.
Yeah,
and it had zero. Whether Terrell Pryor had tattoos on his neck or not, had zero impact on the game. Here they are stealing signs from all of their competitors that had direct impact on the game. It's no big deal.
No, I don't believe that. What if you're looking across at the guy and he's got all these intimidating tats?
Everybody does it.
Look at every college football fan ever. Like, no one ever thinks their team was the targeter on a penalty.
Everybody does
I think it doesn't matter.
All right.
Well, let me ask you guys this then real quick, since we're coming up on the big games, and I know you love your 6 month to prep questions. So being an Auburn fan and always remembering the kick six several years back, let me ask you guys this. If you had 6 months to prep, do you think you could kick a 45-yard field goal in front of 100,000 people?
45-yard. Now, just a one-time go, like you get, like they do at the halftime, where you get up there one time.
One time.
I wouldn't bet on it. Because I think it's the pressure that gets you. If you practice for 6 months, if I practice for 6 months, I could kick them through probably on a somewhat regular basis.
Everybody does it, Robby.
But to be able to do it one time, I don't think so.
Everybody does
I wouldn't bet on
it.
myself.
Everybody cheats.
I wouldn't bet on Rob because he'd pull his hamstring so bad trying to kick a field goal that he'd be like, forget about it.
I disagree. If I had 6 months, I could kick a 45-yarder. I don't know if I could do it under pressure, but I could kick a 45-yarder. I kicked a 35-yarder one time. I would get the best video equipment I could, and I would go record all the other team's kickers. And I would learn exactly how to do it. It'd be very Michigan of me.
But as long as you weren't in person, it'd be all right.
As long as you're not in person, it's okay.
You know the beautiful part about it? I went to Michigan State. I hate Michigan. But I can always get Rob to forget that. When I just start talking, he can't even see the fact that he's a Spartan sitting across the table from him.
I just think it's funny that Michigan people, they claim to be like the most ethical program. They always badmouth Ohio State and they badmouth the SEC. And in fact, they're the ones that just got busted with the largest cheating scandal of the decade.
Well, not only that, but
I find a lot of joy
for the first 3 games of the season too.
Yeah, I mean, look, man. I love the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. I love college football. I like to play it up. I like to joke around. It does matter to me. But Michigan cheated, and the punishment is probably fair, and Harbaugh's probably done at Michigan. But they're a really good football team, and it should be a really good game on Saturday.
Are you going to be okay if your team loses, though?
Yeah, they've lost. They've lost the last 2 years. I was perfectly fine. I'll be fine. I'll be disappointed because I love college football, but honestly, losing to Georgia last year was more heartbreaking than losing to Michigan.
Well, I can tell you this much. I'm pulling for you because I put that $50 bet down for you at the sports book in Vegas.
This is what he does, though. You see how he does this? He plays both sides, so he makes it so he can't lose. Matt is a diehard Michigan fan. Don't ever let him convince you otherwise, Robby.
I put a $50 bet down for Rob's Buckeyes to win it all. I think it pays $350 if it comes in, and then I put down a $50 bet on Mickey's Oregon Ducks. That pays $2,300, and they're still in the running.
Nobody's beating Georgia anyway.
No, not a chance.
That's what they used to say about Alabama.
And nobody really beat Alabama back then either.
All right, so here's our topic of the day, the 3 things that you would change most about the military justice system. That's our topic of the day. I think it'll be a good one. We've touched on a number of these issues in the past on episodes, but today we're going to try to keep it concise. We're going to have you give your opinion on it. We're going to have Robby, as somebody who's relatively new in military justice, give his thoughts on it as well. Should be fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have Robby here because, Robby is new to military justice, and he's learning these things for the first time, and he comes from an extensive legal background. So I'm very anxious to hear his take on some of these things that we're going to talk about. So I'll get started. The 3 things that I would change, I'll list them out first, and then we'll go through them.
What about the number one? Let's put them in priority order, though. Like, you get to change one thing. What would be the first thing on your list?
Unanimous verdicts. I think, number one, head and shoulders above everything else is unanimous verdicts. I cannot for the life of me understand how American citizens who serve in the United States military somehow give up rights when it comes to the criminal justice process. Every other American in this country, if you're going to lose everything you are and everything you're ever going to be in a criminal conviction, it's got to be unanimous. But for some reason in the military, it's not. And I have found CAF's analysis to be wanting. I can't fathom how
the appeals court.
Correct. I can't fathom how logical thinking human beings could come back and say, I don't think unanimous verdicts are necessary in the United States military. It's the most archaic thought process of any. I think it's one of the most archaic thought processes in all of American law, not just military law.
Robby, you've done high-stakes litigation in state and federal court before you joined Capovilla. How crazy is it to you that system exists the way it does?
So I had actually no idea, even through all of my years in the military, that was a thing, and that blows my mind. And every person that I've told since learning that fact, it has also blown their mind. It's quite inconceivable that somebody's justice, somebody's liberty could be taken away from a majority vote.
I always think that if you had to make an argument, it should be the other way around. A military service member should be given more rights because of what they've done. But at least it should be no different, right? It should be neutral.
It should be no different. And think about the number of people that are sitting in Leavenworth right now or the Charleston Brig right now who wouldn't be there if they decided not to serve their country. I mean, actually think about that for a minute. It's shocking, and it should be sickening to a lot of folks. And I don't even know what logical argument you can make to say that it's okay. There's this argument that it's necessary for good order and discipline. That's bogus to me. And we'll have an episode where we dive deeper into CAF's decision, and maybe we'll even have Bill Casera, who was the attorney on that case, the appellate attorney on that case.
It was a recent case on this issue.
Correct. But if you're asking me the number one thing that needs to change, unanimous verdicts.
All right, one other question on this topic before we get into the next one. What would it take to change it? Would it take a strong politician like a president of the United States to make that a goal and to come out against it and to keep pounding the drum on that? What would it take to change it?
It would take the United States Supreme Court to step in, which I hope they do, and say what everybody is thinking who's not a military prosecutor. This is absurd. There are certain aspects of military culture that need to be defended, right? There are certain aspects of the military culture that are cherished. Some of those things shouldn't change. The idea that an archaic system that was developed really post-World War II to make sure that we could fight the nation's wars while still administering justice as a justification for the lack of unanimous verdicts in today's military justice system is crazy. And oh, by the way, one of the other major arguments is, well, the military justice system is just different. It's unique. It's not that unique anymore. We're now no longer allowing service members to choose sentencing between judge alone and panel. Well, that's just like most federal courts, right? We have taken away jurisdiction from the military prosecutors in certain serious crimes, like sexual assault, and we've taken away from the command and given it to this off special trial counsel. Well, that's very similar to what we see in federal state courts. This idea that we're so different and so unique that we ought to strip away the rights of American citizens who serve in the military, to me, I have no other way to describe it except it's asinine.
Yeah.
I can't for the life of me figure out how smart people could look at this and go, that's right. If you decide to serve your country and put yourself in harm's way, you don't get a unanimous verdict. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's nutty. It's kind of nutty. All right, well, we know how you feel about that one.
Did I make it clear enough?
We all know how.
Rich, did I make it clear enough?
And everybody, like you said, Robby, everybody I say that to, they just can't believe it. They just cannot believe it. But, Robert, what do you think is number 2 on your list? Things that you would change about military justice.
Witness production and expert production requests.
Okay, that sounds a little complicated.
It's not. So in the military system, when we meaning the defense, when we want to call a witness, we have to provide a production request to the United States government, to the prosecutors who are prosecuting the case. And we have to name the witness. We have to show the witness's name, their address, their contact information, and then describe to our opponent why those witnesses are relevant. And then the prosecutor has the ability to come back and say, well, in my 2 years of being an attorney, I don't think the defense needs this witness, and I'm denying the witness request. And then it goes to the military judge to decide whether or not the government or the defense has met its burden of necessity and relevance. What happens in that process is you're almost forced to give your entire case away to the government before you ever step in court.
And we're not talking about discovery. We're talking about strategy at that point.
Right. We're talking about what we think the witnesses are going to say, and that includes witnesses the government might not even know about, right, because we have our own investigators. So I think that defense attorneys ought to have their own subpoena power. I think at a minimum, if the Army is so concerned, or I shouldn't say the Army, if the Department of Defense, really, it's all the branches, are so concerned that us mischievous defense counsels are going to abuse the system and request a bunch of witnesses that are not necessarily relevant and waste the taxpayer dollars, which makes me laugh because nobody wastes more money than the United States government in prosecuting these cases, then the Area Defense Council chain of command, the TDS chain of command, should be given a pot of money. And we submit our requests up through the Regional Defense Council for approval, or the subpoenas through the Regional Defense Council for approval. We should not be forced to provide to the government our case so far in advance. And the same is true of expert witnesses. Now, I'm not going to complain much about expert witnesses because the military will pay for an expert witness, which compared to the civilian side is a huge bonus. But even still, I think that there ought to be a way where the defense attorneys can provide that justification in-house and not go to the very same people who are prosecuting our client to request permission.
Robby, in a state court action, it's a subpoena, right? It's a simple subpoena that goes out through the court, filed with the court, and it says, this witness has to appear at trial, right?
Right, and in some courts, it doesn't even need to go through the court. As an attorney, as an agent of the court, essentially, or an officer of the court, you can issue that yourself. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a very simplified process, don't need approval, anything like that.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
100%. So, yeah, I mean, the discovery process in general in state and even federal court is, I always thought it was difficult, but, coming here and seeing it in the military context is pretty asinine.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, Robert. Well, we're already on to number 3 here.
Yeah, so, this third one was, there was a lot that I had kind of considered for this last bit. Because I do think there's quite a few things that I would change about the military justice system to make it more fair. But I'm going to list this as simply panel selection, the broad kind of topic of panel selection. So not voir dire necessarily, but number one, in the military
selection, jury selection.
Correct. In the military justice system, everybody on the panel has to be senior in date and rank to the accused. So where else in American society is there an equivalent to that? I mean, think about it for a second. How would that work? That everybody who serves on your panel on the civilian side has to make more money than you? I mean, the thought of that is fairly ridiculous, right? If we're talking about truly having a trial by your peers, then the panel should consist of all the different ranks and not just folks who are otherwise senior to the client. Let's have a real sample of the population to decide these cases. Because oftentimes when you're talking about folks who are just senior to your client, you're talking about a lot of folks that might have political, might be influenced by the politics of the day or what's best for their own career. So I would absolutely change it. I think that there needs to be a far more traditional sample of panel members than what we have right now.
Yeah, Robby, it's supposed to be a jury or a panel of your peers, right? That's the whole point. It's supposed to be people that are like you or similar to you, correct?
Right, in theory. And of course, you've seen throughout, the evolution of our legal system, how that wasn't always the case, especially in the civil rights eras and things, and how, the detriment that could have on somebody and their rights. So, seeing that is, still alive and well in the military system, should be disconcerting for a large group of people.
And then here's the other part of that, right? The commanding general is the one who essentially picks the panel, and the commanding general is being advised by the staff judge advocate who runs the office that's prosecuting our client. I have absolutely had conversations with members of the JAG Corps that go something like this. Oh, well, we're gonna redo panel selection and who the potential members are because this group we've had recently isn't very good for the government. I mean, are you kidding me?
That's terrible.
Like that absolutely happens. I mean, we've heard that throughout the last 10 years. I've heard that on at least 2 or 3 different occasions.
Yeah.
And that's the unlawful wielding of influence, right? If, I had a very good SJA one time say to me that she put in her own OER officer evaluation template the number of acquittals that happened under her leadership because it shows the system is fair. So I think there's a lot wrong with the panel selection process. I think it should be more indicative of the actual population. I think that it should be those potential panel members should be selected by somebody who is free of influence from the staff judge advocate's office, sort of like the state does it, where it's 100% specifically random, right? So I think that if the average person heard that the commanding general is the person who picks the potential members, and they're being advised by the same office that's prosecuting our client, how fair is that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, you've got issues of command and their influence over the process, right? And who reports to who and what it's smart to do politically and not smart to do politically. You've got that issue. You have the issue of, panel members outranking the accused. And then you had brought up an issue a while back where I think a judge wasn't going to allow you to give a little bit of your background, right? Your service background. You're there in kind of civilian clothes now, right?
Right.
And the judge was not going to allow you to give. That seemed to be, it kind of struck me when you were talking about it as something that's also kind of patently unfair.
The voir dire process in the military is not very consistent. Some judges allow you a true and fair and full opportunity to voir dire the panel members. And I think it's absolutely necessary in the military, more so than even on the civilian side, because those folks are directly impacted by some of the topics and events that we hear every day from the military through media outlets, things like sexual assault, right? I mean, there's no doubt that a lieutenant colonel who wants to make colonel is thinking about sexual assault. And if they have a soldier accused of sexual assault, what's the best way to handle that? And yet some judges only allow very limited voir dire. Some judges, the good judges, allow certainly more free reign with voir dire. The Air Force, I think, does a very good job. Their trial judiciary does a very good job of allowing an extensive voir dire process, because at the end of the day, why would a judge want to limit the voir dire process? Wouldn't you want as fair and as neutral of a jury pool or a panel as you can possibly get? And what harm is there in doing an in-depth voir dire process? What harm is there?
Is it a time issue?
I'm certain that it is, because some judge advocates who become judges think that getting through things expeditiously is a top priority. I've always found that to be a little strange, because to me the top priority is a fair trial. But I find a lot wrong with the panel selection process that takes place in the United States military right now.
Robby, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, especially the part where you said you've seen prosecutors who dismiss panels because, they're not friendly enough to the government. I mean, that just reeks of a Batson challenge, right?
What a luxury.
Face,
huh?
right?
What a luxury.
Yeah. Well, it's more like, I've heard conversations like, we need to talk to the CG and get a new group of panel members selected because this panel they acquit everybody. It's more like that than the prosecutors actually unlawfully influencing the proceedings. But it's comments like that I've heard over the years that you're like, what in God's name are we talking about here? I just think the system gives far too much power to the government, and I think it ought to be a little bit more even. Just my 2 cents, and obviously I'm biased because I'm on the other side of it a lot. But those are the 3 things that I would change.
All right, so last question. We're going to close this one out, keep this episode short. Last question. What's your honorable mention?
Oh, for something that I didn't bring up.
So you gave your top 3. What's your honorable mention? Something that didn't make the list, but if you could change it, would it be not leave the cord across the courtroom that you tripped on that one time and went tumbling down? I mean, what would it be?
No, let me think about that one. So those are the big 3 that I had hit on as I think need to be changed for sure. The other thing that I would change is, and they're starting to make some of these changes, I think, through the Office of Special Trial Counsel, but I've long believed, and I know a lot of senior JAGs that have authority in the JAG Corps that disagree with me, but I've long believed there should be a litigation and judge track in the JAG Corps. Number one, I think they lose too much talent by not allowing their good litigators to litigate. They operate under this belief that everybody has the same skills. We're all here to do the same thing. It's all part of the mission. And I understand that, but when you have good litigators, you need to keep them in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Period. Especially if they want to. I believe that every senior prosecutor should have been a defense lawyer. And I believe that every judge, there should be a specific track to becoming a judge in the military. You should have to do a certain amount of time as a prosecutor. You should have to do a certain amount of time as a defense lawyer. There should be, I think, more stringent requirements on who can be a judge. And I can tell you right now that if the Army had come down to me and said, Mr. Cap, at the time, Captain Capovilla or Major Capovilla, we're going to allow you to litigate. And then we're going to put you on this pathway to become a military judge. I would have strongly considered staying in. And I know a lot of talented litigators that have gotten out that share that same sentiment. Now, the JAG Corps' rebuttal to that is, well, when you sign up for the JAG Corps, you sign up not just to be a trial lawyer, you sign up to know the rules of engagement. You sign up to deploy overseas and make sure that you're advising commanders in combat situations. You're there to provide ethics advice and things like that to commanders. You're not just a litigator. But I do think that there ought to be a specific track for folks like me who just want to try cases. Why should we be unable to serve if we feel like we're exceptional in trial?
Robby, I don't know about you, but I feel a little meaningless right now hearing Mr. Capovilla say that. He's like, well, had they just said this, I'd give up everything I have with these two dudes plus the rest of the firm.
That's not what I said. I said I would have
slighted right now.
No. I said I would have considered it.
Oh.
I would have considered it.
That makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, I would have given staying in more thought. But the second that I was kind of told, like, you're not going to really be able to. Don't stay a defense lawyer too long. It could hurt your career. Don't stay a trial lawyer too long. It's going to hurt your promotion. At that point, it was like, well, I either believe in my own skills. I'm either going to listen to my heart and follow my gut instinct, which is to provide voices to service members, or I'm going to become something that they want me to be that I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I will say that if you ask any service member who left the service, what could they have done different to keep you in? They'll have an answer for that.
Oh, sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't mind, I'd actually like to end on a positive note.
Yeah, of course.
And, obviously, like Rob said, I'm fairly new to military justice, but I have noticed one thing that I do like about military justice, which I think, bears a quick mention, and that is service members are read their rights much quicker and under a much, broader set of rules than you see in the civilian world. And
Really?
I do appreciate that. Much more protections than Miranda affords most people in this country. So,
well, let's do an episode on that someday because I don't think I've heard anything about that.
Yeah, no, listen, there
That's a
are
good
some
point.
things. Yeah, I mean, the Article 31 Bravo rights are great. And there are certain things that benefit military members about the military justice system, but they just get overshadowed by these kind of bigger issues. Like, oh, by the way, you can be sent to jail for life based on 6 of 8.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Think about that. You
Yeah.
get life without parole
That's crazy.
if 6 of 8 think you're guilty.
All right, well, it's a good episode, a short one of the few short ones. I don't know what we ran there, Rick.
Matt,
Maybe
before we end the
30 minutes.
episode, I'm putting you on the record now for the
Oh,
people to
gosh.
hear, for Robby to hear, for Rich to hear, okay? For all 3,000 honorable veterans and active duty members that listen to our podcast. Did Michigan cheat, yes or no?
Of course they cheated. Of course,
Ladies
they
and
cheated.
gentlemen, you heard it
But you know
directly
what?
from the horse's mouth.
But here's the
A
thing.
man from Michigan who will now try to defend himself, and I'm going to take on Matt's role here. And Rich, I'm closing us out. Thank you all very much for listening.
That's funny.
Dude.
In perpetuity now.
Of course they cheated.
Thanks for listening to the Military Justice Today podcast with your hosts, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams. This show was made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. For more information or to listen to more episodes, visit militaryjusticetoday.com.